Honourable Chris Bishop.
Madam Chair, I do want to, I understand there were... Well, I understand, well, you asked some questions which I'm now here to answer, so I wasn't here. So I'm happy to... Well, you literally asked some questions. I'm now here to answer those questions, and we're now getting, getting complaints about answering questions.
Order. I understand Minister Bishop's come to answer some questions around the gas.
My understanding is there were some questions around the oil and gas contribution in the budget and the estimates. I'm happy to answer those questions and actually hear them, but I suspect I know what they are. From Chloe Swarbrick, there'll be the allegation it's a subsidy, and possibly the same line of questioning from Honourable Megan Woods. The government has set aside a contingency in budget 20.
Well, he's referred to the fact that the questions were, is it a subsidy? And the other question talked about the opportunity cost compared with energy resilience. So if we make that the starting point.
Oh, so having asked questions, you now don't want answers. Rightio, we now have an understanding of the Labor Party approach to everything, which is to just speculate and fulminate wildly, and they not actually want questions. A bit like their approach to inflation. The vibe of the thing, yes, a bit like the vibe of Kiwi Build, building 100,000 houses, which that member was responsible for, and was a disaster. So the government has set aside $200 million in the budget as a contingency, which will be drawn down upon the publication of a business case by the Minister for Resources. And the reason the government has set aside that money is because of the disastrous policies between 2018 and 2023, and it's a good faith attempt to deal with the lack of security of supply for gas in the New Zealand energy system. And the simple reality is we need gas, and we need people exploring for gas. And every member, I think, is familiar with the challenges around the insecurity of gas supply. So the government has put $200 million aside so that government can take a stake. The member literally asked questions.
Point of order, Honourable David Seymour.
Madam Chair, I apologise for interrupting my colleague, but the standing orders and Speaker's rulings are very clear that interjections are supposed to be rare, reasonable and preferably witty. A running commentary and barrage like that is making it hard for me to understand what is being said, and I sit right beside the member speaking.
Thank you for the member for the point of order, and I have heard the interjections and they are too loud, but I understand that the Minister started actually asking the questions of Chloe Swarbrick if there are further questions, but I'm going to let the Minister finish answering the question.
Which is the government has set aside this money so that we can become a potential co-investor in new gas fields to try and reduce the sovereign risk that has occurred to New Zealand because of the disastrous policies of the previous government. Now, having repealed the oil and gas ban, we've got that into place, but there are clearly people out there in the world who look at New Zealand and say, well, hang on a minute, if the cowboys on the other side get back in, what are we going to do? So we need an ability to make sure that people have some of their investments de-risked, and one way of doing that, and frankly, if it was over to me in a personal sense, we wouldn't be doing it, but one way of de-risking that investment is for the Crown to take a stake in oil and gas fields being the major focus, obviously, that being the cause of concern. And so we are working our way through that between the Minister of Resources and myself as Associate Minister of Finance. And when we have announcements to make, we will do that. It is not a subsidy, and it cannot be a subsidy if the government has a commercial stake in a field. Well, you're wrong about that with respect. It's just an investment.
Chloe Swarbrick.
I'm really glad that the Minister is here and now engaging directly with this, because I would like to know and to understand what specific advice he has actually had with regard to the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability with regard to its definition of a subsidy. So this is what I have been trying to get answers to over a series of months in direct questions to the Trade Minister, to the Prime Minister, in Official Information Act requests and in parliamentary written questions, just to understand what the evidential basis is that allows the Minister to make those assertions that this is not a subsidy. Because the World Trade Organization defines a subsidy effectively as a form of investment, whether that be co-investment or just taxpayer money being used and put into something that the private sector would not do by itself. By that definition, this is a subsidy, and I would like to ask the Minister, I know that he's been dismissing, as many other ministers in this Cabinet have been, the advice that we commissioned because we have been unable to get access to anything that this government has used to make its decision, whether he is engaged in or looked at the independent King's Council advice that we commissioned in order to get some clarity around this definition of subsidy.
Sure. Happy to address that. It's a good question from the member. As the member, I think, well knows, the government doesn't release privileged legal advice as a matter of course, so we won't be doing that. But let me just reason it for the member in this way. The government owns 51% of Meridian Energy. It's a listed company, but the government owns 51% of it. Meridian investing in a new wind farm, that is not a subsidy. That is just an investment. So if the government sets up a separate company on the Crown balance sheet as a Schedule 4 company, for example, or through another vehicle that's owned by the Crown, and the Crown takes a stake in a gas field, say a 10% stake with a co-investment from a range of private sector partners, that is not a subsidy. That's just an investment. It's the same way as Meridian investing in a wind farm, or Genesis investing in a particular type of power station, or Kānoa investing in a range of infrastructure investments through the Regional Infrastructure Fund up and down the country. For example, the Crown investing in something is not a subsidy. It's just an investment. And I know the member doesn't like gas, but she needs to divorce her views on gas from the basic maths and basic economics.
Just further to that point, if I may, Madam Chair, I just want to be crystal clear with the Minister that this is not a matter of my personal opinion. This is about the definition of what is considered a fossil fuel subsidy under the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability. So all of my personal opinions about the need for us to act with pace to address the climate crisis aside, this is about very literally the words in a trade agreement which this government championed signing after 5 years of negotiation with a press release from Minister Todd McClay in November of last year. And in the advice that we have received, because again, we are yet to get any insight into the evidentiary basis on which the government is standing and consistently declaring this is not a subsidy, well, the information that we have is that this is a subsidy per Article 4.32B1 because, firstly, the financial contribution, that being the subsidy under the definition of the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability, is firstly primarily targeting the exploration, extraction, refining and processing of a fossil fuel, which the Minister would not disagree with, and secondly, because it will reduce the costs of such activities or increases the revenue retained by the co-investors who are the actors engaged therein. Based on those two premises, on those principles, this meets the definition of a subsidy under the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability. So I'd just really like to understand how the Minister can consistently say the opposite when he has not addressed the definition in the ACCTS.
Well, I don't have a huge amount more to add to what I've already said, which is respectfully, appreciate the members engaging in this in good faith, and it is a complicated issue, but respectfully, the government, via an investment vehicle that is owned by the Crown, investing in a new gas field alongside private sector co-investment is just an investment. It would be different if the government was going along and saying, we are going to pay you money in order to do something. Not doing that. It's a co-investment on commercial terms. And that's the way, I mean, it's subject to detailed design, and we haven't yet drawn down the contingency, so I caveat my remarks by saying that, and Minister Jones is leading on this alongside me, working hard on that. But that's not the intention of the policy design. And therefore it is not a subsidy. The government remains really confident in its view that it is not. And I know the member has legal advice to the contrary, but respectfully we disagree.